Okay, thank you all for being here. I think we can start this next and last session for the year of Revolutionizing Healthcare, actually the 39th session that we've done now. And it is sort of a revival and sort of a update on our session on AI education for clinicians, which we've done last year. And a lot has happened since. We've had a lot of discussions with really insightful people. And we're going to share some of that today with you. And we're really happy to add new people to the mix that we haven't talked with yet. And we have an amazing panel lined up for you today. So I'm sure that it's going to be a very interesting and insightful session. And thank you for being a part of it. Talking about our panel, I will hand over to Tim Oosterlinck to introduce him.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our session. We were fortunate to have an exceptional lineup of speakers today who are really at the forefront of artificial intelligence and integrating it. First of all, I'm pleased to introduce Professor Curtis Langlotz, who will be joining us. He's a professor of radiology, medicine, and biomedical data science at Stanford University, where he also holds the roles of Senior Associate Vice Provost for Research and the Director of the Center of Artificial Intelligence in Medicine and Imaging. Additionally, he's also a Senior Fellow at the Institute of Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence. Secondly, I'm pleased to introduce Professor Adam Rodman. He serves as an assistant professor of medicine, and he is the director of AI programs and co-director of the IMED initiative, as well as the director of foundations in digital educations at the Shapiro Institute for Education and Research at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. He's also affiliated with Harvard Medical School. And finally, I'm also delighted to introduce Finn Fassbender. He's a fourth-year medical student and machine learning student from the University of Tübingen in Germany. He also serves as a chairman of the Medical Student Council and represents the German Medical Students Association. I think his unique perspective as a current student and a future medical professional will provide us with key insights as well.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you all for being here today. How the session will work is we'll have roughly a runtime of 1 hour, as always, and after this brief introduction, we'll start with a few words by Mihaela. Then we'll briefly present some of the work we've done over the past year on AI education. Then we would give the floor to the panel and start with some opening statements and then our general panel discussion. And as always, you can put questions into the chat whenever you would like for the Q&A, and we will either take them during the session or toward the end of the session. And without further ado, I'm delighted to hand over to Professor Mihaela van der Schaar, who is the mastermind behind these sessions.
Very much, Tim. Hello, everyone. It's truly a joy to welcome you to this 39th engagement session of our Revolutionizing Healthcare series. And it has been really a big journey for us with these sessions, which began actually in September 2020. And looking back now at these past 4.5 years, I'm really amazed at how far we have come over this past almost 5 years now. And when we started these sessions, the conversation around AI in healthcare often felt like a dream, a distant dream, with many clinicians understandably being cautious about its role in medicine. And I feel that today we are at a milestone where we can not only talk about applying AI in clinical settings, but also begin to discuss, like we are going to do today, how we can systematically integrate it into medical education throughout, from medical schools to the daily lives of practicing clinicians. And this session is particularly exciting for me because we are going to discuss a paper which we have co-authored with the two teams, Patrick and Robert, in which we outlined a three-tiered model of medical AI expertise. And it highlights not just the challenges, but also provides a framework for us, the community, to think about how to do that, how to integrate AI education in medicine. And to me personally, this represents the culmination of countless discussions, debates, learning experiences over the past many years. At the same time, it's a sign that we are no longer talking about AI as a niche technology, but as a core part of the future of medicine. I also like at this stage to briefly take a moment to recognize the two incredible young clinicians which have driven this work forward, Tim Oosterlinck and Tim Schubert. They are amazing partners for me in running these revolutionizing healthcare sessions, and they share very much my vision and passion for transforming medicine with AI. So a big thank to you, the two teams. And they also have been instrumental in writing this manifesto, and their energy and commitment inspires me, and I'd say should remind us all of the role of interdisciplinarity, the role of intergenerational discussions that will need to take place in order to transform AI in medicine. I also would like to say just one more word about the fact that earlier this fall, we have run the world's first summer school on AI dedicated to clinicians. So in Cambridge, under the auspices of the Cambridge Center for AI in Medicine, which I direct, we have run together with the two teams this world's first summer school on AI in medicine. And we have enjoyed it very much. We have learned some lessons from it, and we plan to run it again next year. So you'll hear about that. And really, finally, I'd like to say that I really hope that together with you, the revolutionary clinicians joining these sessions over the years, we are building a bridge between these two worlds of AI and medicine. And it's exhilarating to me to see how this vision is coming to life. So thank you very much all for being here today and for being part of this incredible journey. And at the end of the year, I just like to end with the hope that we are going together push the boundaries of what's possible in healthcare with AI. Thank you very much. Tim, now the floor is yours to show the framework.
Thanks a lot, Mihaela, for the very nice introduction. First of all, of course, this is really meant more as a discussion framework, the whole paper that we wrote, rather than a definite guide that you can adhere to, which is also why we're having a discussion today and why we'll continue to be having discussions, because we really think there's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to educating clinicians about AI. And again, there are mainly 5 people behind this work. Mihaela van der Schaar, Tim Oosterlinck, Professor Robert Stevens, and Professor Patrick Maxwell, and it's been just a pleasure collaborating with them on this. I would like to start briefly by just reminding people who may be new to this of the promise of machine learning for healthcare. So machine learning can help us make predictions. It can help us do causal inference, meaning we can figure out is treatment A or treatment B better, for example, basically estimate treatment effects for an individual patient. And there's so much more as well. And this graph on the right is just meant to highlight what LLMs can contribute. So this is really just a glimpse into what machine learning can provide. But I would also like to highlight 3 key ethical issues that AI brings about, which is the question of interpretability, of fairness and bias in data, and of accountability, i.e. who is responsible for predictions being made by AI technologies. And because of this promise of machine learning for healthcare, it's really important that future clinicians know about machine learning, know roughly how things work and how they can use it to improve patient care. But we felt that at the moment, there's really no structured discussion happening with regards to how should clinicians actually be educated about AI. And usually the first step in a discussion is figuring out what are the key issues that we're trying to solve, what are the key questions. And it all starts with which AI skills do future clinicians actually need. And there may be different skill levels, and I'll come back to that. That people can have. There may be country-specific considerations, specialty-specific considerations, and more. The second question we wanted to ask is how should medical schools incorporate AI into existing curricula? And we've identified 2 main challenges. One is more of a logistical nature, and the other one is more pertaining to curriculum design. And then thirdly, we also have a huge healthcare workforce who are already working. And the question is really, how can current clinicians gain the knowledge they need? And again, there's a question of, can we tailor this education to specializations? And secondly, what should be the content and what should be the frequency with which continuing education updates need to happen? And to guide the discussion, we started by defining basic, proficient, and expert skills. And what we understand by that is basically skills that could be sort of a broader, it's more of a broader framework just to anchor the discussion. And we want to say basically, how can we build up from the ground up from basic skills to proficient skills and expert skills? And then also ask the question, which skills should the average clinician have? So with basic skills, we mainly mean the practical ability to use clinical AI tools, basically use the software. And prerequisites for that would be intuitive user interfaces and just training in the basic concepts, but mainly practical experience. And secondly, just basically the knowledge about the specific AI tools that would be in use within the clinician's work environment. So this is quite basic, would allow people to use the tools. On a more proficient level, what we understand by that is to critically use these tools, to critically assess their utility and their outputs, and also to understand the ethical implications of integrating AI technologies. As I said before, there are several things that you have to pay attention to, things including fairness, interpretability, bias, etc. And at the proficient skill level, we think this would be part of that. And prerequisites for that would be additional knowledge and perhaps also scientific skills for interpreting and evaluating the outputs of AI tools, maybe even through clinical trials. And at a proficient skill level, that also means that clinicians would be much more able or better able to communicate about AI outputs to their patients because they would actually understand what happens sort of under the hood. And then we defined expert skills as a deeper technical understanding of machine learning combined with clinical expertise that would really enable these experts to drive meaningful advancements in medical AI. And in this case, we think there's a deeper technical understanding of machine learning necessary. Basically, a bit what Finn is doing right now with his second machine learning degree, probably. And you would likely need either dual expertise or you would need enough understanding to have the ability to explain clinical challenges in a way that machine learning scientists will understand. And we formulated key questions to guide the discussion. I will not go into detail about them because that will probably be part of the panel. But at this stage, I would really like to ask you, the audience, what do you think? Which of these skill levels would be appropriate for an average clinician to have? And you can just vote in the Zoom poll, and we'll have the results probably in just a minute. So 55% of people think that proficient skills are more appropriate, and 45% think of basic skills. We also, in our paper, proposed that proficient skills are likely preferable from a societal point of view, because clinicians, let's face it, will probably be the key stakeholders who decide how outputs by AI tools are used and how the AI tools are used, because they're probably going to be the people using them. And that's why it's probably preferable to actually have them have these ethical considerations in mind, really understand model outputs well, etc. But I'm sure we can discuss this more in the panel. Then I said there are two main challenges for medical schools. We first identified a logistical challenge, which basically means that space needs to be carved out of these really packed existing curricula that medical school already has. And we think people should really evaluate student and faculty workload again, review the current curricula and basically identify which content may be replaceable or modifiable. And a big challenge will also be training and recruiting AI literate educators. And I'm going to give a few suggestions there in just a minute. Secondly, just wanted to mention the curricular challenge is mainly the question of, okay, how do we design our curricula, when and how should we teach the crucial skills? And we think that you should first identify overlapping mandatory core competencies that all clinicians will need, and then put optional competencies sort of into more student selected components. And a few suggestions just summed up is train the average clinician to have proficient skills, embrace a shift from simple memorization of facts, what happens nowadays, mostly in medical schools, to a larger focus on knowledge management and understanding the outputs of tools like machine learning tools. Teach fundamental concepts early during preclinical years and then more specific content later on, and incorporate practical experience with especially specialty agnostic AI tools, because everyone will profit from that. Now, about continuing education, again, it's about which skills are actually the most important. And we think that for continuing education, it will be easier to actually tailor AI education to the clinician's specialty and to their work environment. And in prerequisites, understanding their role and the needs of the specific specialty, and also understanding which technology is used at the institution, because I don't know how it is in other countries, but particularly in Germany, every institution sort of uses their own IT system, which makes it really hard to be interoperable. With regards to the frequency and contents of AI education in continuing education, we think it's going to be really hard and tough, and maybe people have suggestions for how to distinguish AI applications that actually promise improved clinical and systemic outcomes from temporary trends, and particularly machine learning is such a fast-moving field that this may be one of the biggest issues there. And we think that that requires an awareness of the evolving landscape, probably particularly from specialized organizations that would also write guidelines, for example. They would probably gain the best overview in the end of which tools are most appropriate for a specialty. And again, we have a few suggestions that we outlined in the paper, which is define and regularly update specialty-specific skills, make use of conferences, do workshops there, do massive open online courses, etc., to deliver this teaching to as many clinicians as possible. And also train clinicians for the tools that are specific to their hospital during onboarding or when new tools are being introduced. And of course, last but not least, don't forget about healthcare workers other than physicians, because we tend to focus only on them. But there are studies on nurses and other practitioners and even administrative personnel that show that these groups can also really benefit from AI education and would like to know more about machine learning. And with that, I want to stop talking for now and basically set the stage for the panel to discuss this more. But if you want to read more about this and get involved in the discussion yourself, our paper has just been published in eClinicalMedicine, and we're really happy about it. So just feel free to scan the QR code. We'll also send the link into the chat. And we, again, provide a few recommendations, but this is really set out to be a discussion framework for people to use and come to different conclusions than us, and maybe improve upon our recommendations and really shape the future of AI education for clinicians. So thank you so much for listening, and I will hand over back to Tim Oosterlinck.
Right. Thank you, Tim. I think now it's a good time for our panelists to maybe give a brief opening statement, maybe like 5 minutes. I will also put a timer just for time's sake. Feel free to talk about anything you'd feel like, your background, your involvement, or your experience with AI education, or just a few thoughts you have. We'll have time for a Q&A and discussion later on in the session.
Yes, thank you, Tim. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I am a radiologist and a computer scientist, and I approach the topic more as someone leading a research lab, but we have also thought quite a bit about education. So I thought I would just share for a minute some of the activities that we have undertaken to try to educate not just clinicians, but many others. So just to give you a sense, our center here is called Center for Artificial Intelligence in Medicine and Imaging. So we support over 200 faculty at Stanford across 20 departments who are all interested in this issue of developing new AI methods for clinical decision support. We've been around for about 6 years. At our 5th anniversary, we published this article, which is in Mayo Clinic Proceedings of Digital Health, that just describes our experience with all aspects of our mission, education being just one. Just to give you a sense of those 4 aspects of our mission, we build infrastructure to help make it easy for researchers to have the data they need to train these models. We provide small grants to catalyze extramural funding. We facilitate interdisciplinary collaborations, and then we engage and educate. And so the education theme here is what I'll focus on today. And just in preparing for this talk, I put together a framework which I think is complementary to yours. I just thought about it from the perspective of learners. So those who want to become computer data scientists who do this kind of research work, we think a lot about those because we are a research center. So we have a high school program, we have a program for college and early graduate school students, and then PhDs and postdocs in the lab. On the clinical side, we have really not much. We haven't done as much as I would have liked, but we do a little bit of medical student and medical trainee education, and we do have some clinician education opportunities that I'll mention as well. And then I thought it would be worth mentioning at least what I call bilingual track. So those who are both clinicians and can speak the language of computer and data science. I think it's important to have at least a few of those individuals if you're planning to do research in this area. So just starting with our high school program. So we have what's called a high school internship and a high school summer boot camp where we bring students virtually onto campus for 2 weeks. This program last year received over 2,000 applicants for 40 positions. And these students come onto campus, they come virtually onto campus. They get education from our faculty, they get mentoring from our postdocs and students. Half of the program is more of a learning program, the boot camp. The internship is more of an actual project-based course. So at the end, they have broken into teams and develop AI algorithms using some support and Jupyter notebooks that we prepare for them. Been an extremely popular program, and I think it sort of feeds the pipeline of individuals interested in this area. For students, this is for students here at Stanford, we have what's called a Healthcare AI Boot Camp, which is really a project-based learning opportunity. So senior undergraduates, junior graduate students can sign up and get course credit. And then we also take applications from clinicians who have data sets and interest in clinical problems. And then on the first day of class, the clinicians present their problems, the students break up into teams, and over the next quarter or two, they solve these problems. And this results in publications and algorithms. And it's popular on both sides because the clinicians love to have what's basically free labor, engineering talent to help solve their problems. And the students love getting exposed to clinical problems with the clinical mission and using their engineering talents to solve some of those problems. For the more senior people, really, we just have on-the-job training. So this is my lab where I have a bunch of PhD students, master's students, and postdocs working together. And of course, they're taking a lot of the coursework here at Stanford. So that's just on the research side. Now, quickly on the clinical side, we do have a couple of offerings there that are interesting. As it happens, starting tomorrow for 2 days, we have a virtual CME course called AI Plus Health here at Stanford. 4 tracks you can see there. And it's really focused on, as you can see, very applied clinical AI applications. How do we integrate AI into healthcare settings? Some of the ethical issues. We have the fundamentals, which is more of just a tutorial, basic tutorial for clinicians, and then some industry insights, some trends coming from industry. So that's been a popular way to educate clinicians of all stripes, all levels of expertise. And then lastly, I'm also have been in the leadership of the Radiological Society of North America over the last many years. And it's developed what I think is a model for how this could work in subspecialties, which is an RSNA Imaging AI Certificate Program. So this is an online course, much like Coursera, where you have short videos and exercises kind of alternating. And we have now 3 courses. There's a foundational course, an advanced course, and then an emergency imaging course, and we're planning to roll out courses across other subspecialty areas, musculoskeletal imaging, neuroimaging, and so forth. We also offer other kinds of activities for clinicians, spotlight courses, AI challenges where clinicians can be part of teams or can help label data. And then we have a journal in that area. And then lastly, this is a bit out of date, but I took a sabbatical about 3 years ago now. Wow, long time ago. And just explored many of the online resources and their usefulness for clinicians. And this really breaks things down into 3 tiers, which I think are somewhat similar to your tiers, where we have, I just want to be the kind of the interested person in my practice about AI, all the way to, hey, I'd like to be a collaborator in a research lab, to, wow, now I want to run a research lab, and the kinds of training that you might need and could be made available to you if you are a clinician. Again, a little out of date in the days of large language models. But so those are some of the training resources that we've thought about. I think it's an exciting time for this kind of AI education. There's a lot happening, and I'm looking forward to answering your questions in the panel.
Thank you, Professor Langlotz. That's really great initiatives. I think a lot of us here are very happy that you share them with us. Next, I'll hand over to Professor Rodman, or maybe to Finn, if Professor Rodman is still walking.
I'm here. I'm just outside of my office.
Perfect. If you'd like, you can take the lead.
Yes, I mean, so I'm just going to talk very briefly. As I am walking, I was just on another panel, so it's a panel morning for me. I am at Harvard Medical School. I am the leader of the task force to integrate artificial intelligence into the HMS, like pre-clerkship curriculum. And I think I can give everybody I'm also a researcher, so I'm a reasoning researcher. I do a lot of work on human-computer interaction, how AI technologies change the way that we think. But the Harvard position actually right now is that things are changing very, very quickly. I've seen some themes that have come out about a basic literacy in data science. We just launched for our health science technology, that's about 20% of our medical students, a 5-week data science course that really goes into how these technologies work and critical appraisal of some of these technologies and machine learning technologies in general, obviously not just language models. One of the challenges that we are facing right now in medical education is not this basic information, though. It's preparing students with the information that they're going to need for a 30-year career timeline when the nature of medical work is going to change very, very quickly. We also have, I mean, just to say it out loud, there is a crowded curriculum. There is a lot that we need our learners to learn in order to be medical students. And 5 weeks would not at all work for the pathway students, right? If you think about what doctors need to know, and I would say compare this to advanced imaging, compare this to an MRI. They need to know how to interpret the outputs of MRIs, but do they need to know the physics behind how the MRI machine works? Well, they need to have something of an idea. So I think it's an open question still about what tools do we give our current medical students to prepare them for a future that is going to look drastically different than what they have right now. I will be the first to admit that we don't know the answer. If anybody tells you they know the answer to this, I promise you they don't. Things are changing very, very quickly. And so far at Harvard, our policy is to give people the basic abilities, give them access to the tools. For those who are going into research careers, give them more in-depth data science knowledge, some programming knowledge. And otherwise, we're waiting and seeing what's going to happen. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. And finally, I'll also give the word to Finn. He's a bit more on the student level from the bottom up, so he can also look up while the professors were having a big overview. So I think this will be interesting as well.
Last semester actually was this semester where I had my statistics education in medical school, and whilst I absolutely agree, it's curriculum design is really, really hard. I'd also talked beforehand with some of my friends from other universities who are much more involved in the design of the new German curriculum, because there's also some student voices in there. And curriculum design is really, really hard. And if you don't really know what you're designing for, it's even harder to kind of make sure that at the end of the process of the curriculum design, that there are some targets to hit where the students are properly prepared for a good future. And kind of circle back a bit to what you, Tim, said in the very beginning. On the, I think the second white slide where, so I'd hard argue for that you need proficient skills to in future kind of work properly with it, with AI. And I forgot the point that I wanted to make. There was a very nice sentence that you had on these slides that I wanted to refer. Can you maybe pull them up again? If it's quite possible.
Okay, I'll
maybe
pull them up.
I'll remember later. Yeah. One of my most important points would be that when we talk about AI education and all that kind of stuff, we need to recognize it's really hard. It's really hard to design for things that are constantly changing, and to kind of provide a good basis for all of that, because I feel like when I look at my statistics education that at least I have in university, in Germany, you go to medical school right after high school, so you don't do an undergraduate degree beforehand. That's different from the US. When I take a look at my statistics education, what is required of me to know of statistics, the curriculum kind of refers to paired, unpaired t-tests, chi-square tests, to kind of know them, maybe critically assess them, and it says understanding p-values. And if I think back to one of the machine learning courses I had on basically data literacy, which was one semester basically just talking about how do I understand a p-value. I mean, even for graduate students that are studying this professionally and kind of 9 credit points worth of 30 ECTS worth for full semester, getting a grip of what a p-value truly is really, really hard. So the skills that we want people to acquire are also really hard to acquire. Not only, I mean, when we're talking about proficiency and we're just saying, well, they need to be proficient, that's actually, in my opinion, basically impossible, at least with the current structure that we have, and I also do not have a proper solution for that. Yeah, it's a bit of rambling on my part. I thought about preparing some slides, but didn't have the time over the weekend because I had an examination course. I mean, I'm still a student, but yeah, I think there are some other points where we might piggyback off some other people on this panel to kind of talk a bit deeper about all the things that I try to kind of get at this very moment.
Okay, thank you, Finn. And it's no problem at all that you don't have a solution already. That's why we're bringing everybody together, so we can have the biggest minds here to talk about this. And speaking of a great person who's also present, and we're very honored that he made the time to be here as well, is Professor Maxwell, who also wrote the paper together with us. I was wondering if you have any thoughts, or if you'd like to add anything to what the speakers already have assessed and discussed.
Well, thank you, Tim. And there have been some very interesting points that have been made already. So I do think that the amount of stuff in the curriculum is a major problem. So adding in big blocks for undergraduate medical students without taking stuff out is problematic. We actually had an excellent discussion about this at the UK Medical Schools Council. So a group chaired by Sinead Langan has done some work on the broader question of data science and healthcare, but quite a bit of that, as you would expect, was on artificial intelligence. And what has come out of that is for medical students, their recommendations were very much around understanding the terms, the principles, trying to give them a set of tools to think about how to navigate the AI landscape, as they develop as clinicians, and being very aware of the potential pitfalls and limitations of AI. And then I think the second thing that is happening is that in UK courses, we think that encouraging students to use AI for themselves, in tasks going through medical schools, and to think carefully about what AI is producing is a good thing rather than a bad thing. That this is slightly controversial at the moment. Are we undermining students' sort of learning by encouraging them to use AI, or are we letting them learn, for themselves rapidly what the potential and solutions are? And personally, I'm very much in favor of the latter approach, with some expert support, aiming to encourage them to use AI really as much as they can, as much as they feel comfortable with, right through the different segments of the course, so that they are getting personal experience probably more rapidly than the faculty. I don't know if those are helpful remarks, Tim, but they're just some thoughts off the top of my head. And there will be a paper coming from the Medical Schools Council in the UK soon, which will cover what we think are core competencies that medical students should have. And then it'll be up to individual schools as to how they incorporate those into their curricula.
Okay, and I look forward to seeing it as well. And I will suggest that we go into the panel Q&A, piggybacking on that specific topic. You talked about core competencies, and that brings us to the first question, which you also addressed in the paper, and that is, what AI skills should future clinicians be equipped with? What should they be able to do? What level should they be able to do it with? Touched on it in the beginning, but I think hearing your viewpoints from you, the panelists, would be really great to hear. So I would maybe suggest that Professor Langlotz, I don't know, what is your opinion on this? Which level of skills do future clinicians need?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I agree with the results of the poll, which is, I think proficiency is the right level. We're talking about humans and machines cooperating or collaborating, right? The human plus machine is better than either one alone. That's been true in AI since decades ago. And to me, that means critical use of these systems. So that means a certain level of understanding, not necessarily having to build one of these systems, but knowing how they work. So for a language model, for example, knowing that a language model is a probabilistic prediction machine that is simply trying to predict the next word, the next word, the next word. Understanding that, I think, gives you a lot of insight into the strengths and the weaknesses of these language models. Or just conventional machine learning, understanding that machine learning is learning from data. And so the system that results is going to be the result of the data on which it is trained, and that data can have its own quirks and biases and problems. I think those are important principles. So for example, a machine learning algorithm trained on adults won't necessarily work on children, that kind of thing. And Adam alluded to this example, which I frequently refer to as a radiologist. I'm old enough to remember the days when MRI was new. And we had to learn, as radiology trainees, we had to learn about the physics of MRI and how the images were encoded. There's a phase encoding and there's a frequency encoding. And the reason you need to know that is because the phase encoding can create artifacts when there is flow. So flow in the aorta, when duplicated across the image, can look like a mass in the liver. And if you don't understand enough about how MRI machines work, you are going to be fooled by that. And I think the same is true for AI, that we need to know enough about how these systems work. Clinicians need to know enough about how these systems work so that they know when they might be led astray by some of the recommendations, and they know the kinds of mistakes that these systems make, and they know the strengths, the differences between the kind of inferences that these systems make and the kind of inferences that humans make.
Yeah, and thank you. And with this, we're getting into more of a technical field as well, which is really great because we have a technical person with us. Mihaela, would you like to comment?
Definitely. So I completely agree with what both Kurt and Adam said, but maybe I'll offer a somewhat similar but complementary perspective, I often think that the type of tools that the AI community can build for clinicians are quite diverse and growing. So maybe a different way of thinking about that is tools, instruments. Like in medicine, you often have different tools with which you engage with. And we talked about an MRI machine, or maybe in surgery, a particular device you are using, or why not a robot. You can think about these AI tools as tools that you can decide to pick up, not only at your early stage of education in the clinical school, but also as you are becoming a more senior clinician, and engage with these tools as needed to better practice your profession. So I really hope that we can build together with clinicians, with the AI community, can build together with clinicians a set of useful tools which can be very carefully validated and which the clinicians can use in their own healthcare specialty to really move medicine to the next level. And from that point of view, I'd say, how many tools should we learn? It depends really on your specialty. I think maybe different specialties will engage with different tools. I'd also kind of like to say that I hope that we move to a new era where clinicians are going to become even more adventurous in trying to understand disease, to understand the fundamentals of disease, but also understand even more about the patients in front of them, and use these AI tools to ask pertinent questions. So maybe currently everything that's happening when a clinician is in front of a patient is happening purely on the, let's say, the gray cells of that brilliant clinician. And maybe in the future, as the patient is maybe complex, their diagnosis may be complex, their treatment may be complex, the clinicians could learn to pick up the right tools and use them and maybe even shape them for their personalized experience to really better treat the patients and also evolve the science. So I think much more about this in terms of tools, maybe numerous tools. We never know all the tools. So maybe you should not learn about all the tools, but the tools that are pertinent to you and to your profession. And I'd like to invite the clinicians, definitely the revolutionary clinicians in these sessions and people like Kurt and others that wear the two hats, to really drive this, let's say, decision on what tools we should be building, and invite the specialties to design these tools as well. I don't know whether this is useful, Tim, but
I think
my perspective on it.
I just react to that, Mihaela. I think that's a really helpful framework. And I for example, a radiologist who's using a tool that puts a marker on a mammogram that might be a cancerous lesion, that's very different than, let's say, a clinic physician who is using an ambient intelligence tool to draft a note based on the encounter with the patient. Those are two very different things. And so I think it's useful to think about it in that way. At the same time, that poses a real challenge for education, because the kind of education you need might be very tool specific. And so each specialty, I think, is going to have to come up with its own curriculum. That's why I raised that RSNA curriculum, because I think it is important. Many other specialties will need to do the same thing for the kinds of tools that their specialty clinicians use.
You allow me to jump on that, Tim, to respond to Kurt and put a question to him. But Kurt, isn't this the case when we have new medication or we have new devices are introduced? We need to learn about these tools on a per specialty basis. And because new tools are appearing even after you graduate from medical school, maybe a similar approach needs to be given not only to tools, physical tools and devices and medicine, but maybe to AI. I don't know. This is a question to all of you, to you, to Adam.
Yeah, well, I agree with that, but there's a good and a bad of that. So I think that we have the same kinds of evaluations that work for pharmaceuticals or other diagnostic tools work also for AI, right? It's a fancy tool, but it's still just a diagnostic tool. So the same ROC curves, accuracy, all of those things. Or if it's a pharmaceutical or a therapeutic, the clinical trial published in the New England Journal or wherever it might be, those are the ways in which we evaluate. So in some ways, our evaluation methods don't have to change as much. there's a little wrinkle in the sense that these tools can change as the data that's fed to them changes. So it's not as fixed as some of the other therapeutics or diagnostics that we have assessed in the past. But I would say right now we do face the issue of transparency. So I don't think we have as much information about machine learning tools or devices, whatever you want to call them. I think of table 1 in the clinical trial, right? If you go to the Lancet and it's got a clinical trial on table 1, it tells you all about the patients that were in that trial, so you can decide whether that tool works and would work in your practice, right? And I don't think we're getting the same amount of information about the AI algorithms that are products today. I know in radiology that's true, where we have an industry. I just came from a conference. We had 120 different companies all selling AI to radiologists, and many of them don't provide the same level of information so that the customer can't assess whether they will work for them.
Yeah, and I run clinical trials. So
I do think we need to have a session on this, Kurt and Adam. I think we need to have a session. I think teams, you should flag a session on exactly this point, I think, of Kurt, because I think we really need to discuss that and debate that very much.
Yeah, and we're also talking about tools. These are like massive sets of software sometimes, or sometimes very little ones, written in some kind of programming language, which brings us to the next question that I would maybe put to Adam. Do you think personally, and I will also ask Mihaela after, do you think clinicians will need to be able to code or understand programming language to be able to assess these tools or work with them?
Honestly, no. I don't think that's a reasonable expectation from physicians, the same way that we don't expect them to understand physics to understand the output of MRI machines. And that's the problem, because as Kurt was saying, we're rolling out these technologies. If you look at ambient listening, like I'm an editor at Nijam AI, if you look and take a hard-nosed look at ambient listening, the studies say it doesn't work. There's no time savings. We're rolling them out. They're not measuring some of the downstream impacts of these technologies. Knowing a programming language does not help you assess whether or not these technologies work if the vendors are not running clinical trials, if they're not presenting the information on how it changes decision making. So yeah, I don't actually think that's particularly helpful, but I'm also I study cognitive science, so I have my own biases.
Mihaela, would you like to shortly touch up on this before we...
No, definitely, I agree completely with Adam. I think that's fantastically on point. And as you may know, in some of the sessions that we have run previously, and we are going to continue to run, we really advocate the use of these AI copilots, where eventually clinicians can design technology and can drive the design of this technology without the need to code. Our Climb Copilot, which we presented in a previous session, is an example of that. But I do believe that we will build as a joint community a lot more copilots. And I think that this is extremely important to empower the clinicians such that they don't need their personal geek that codes, but rather build these copilots that do the coding. But that does bring the important point that Kurt mentioned, validation. So I do think we need to do both, enable the clinicians to build these tools by themselves with tools like Climb, but I also think we need to think about judicious validation of these tools beyond just the data and that know-how of that particular individual. But maybe, and again, I'm curious on what Adam and Kurt and other panelists and other people in the audience think, would it be a possibility that a clinician builds their own tools using, for instance, these new Gen AI technologies? If they want to build something for their own clinic, for their own patients, maybe they should be able to do that, and maybe they should be able to do that and validate it themselves, and the usefulness should be validated by themselves. Do you see such a possibility where revolutionary clinicians like the ones that come to these sessions would be allowed to build their own tools, validate their own tools, and then apply their own tools? I'm not sure what Adam and Kurt think. Sorry, Tim, for delaying the discussion, but I'm quite curious to hear Adam and Kurt's opinion.
Well, maybe I'm coming from, this is an ivory tower view, but I've seen some difficulties with these more push-button approaches to building tools. So, the nice thing about machine learning these days is if you have the right data set You can pull a, ResNet 50 off the shelf and plug in the data, and you get a result out the other side. You build an ROC curve. You say, okay, this, has a certain accuracy. That process is fairly easy to do. But understanding whether there are confounders, biases, whether you could actually build a much better model if you understood the problem and the possible architectures better, we often find that you can do a much, sort of a step above what you would get from more of a standard pipeline, do it yourself, shall we say. So, I mean, I guess there may be a role for that, but I worry we would be doing a disservice to the patient by saying, well, this is good enough, as opposed to let's build the best possible, most accurate model that can perform this task. And that's part of what I think, industry's role is, in part to do that as well, and to have these benchmarking approaches where we can actually compare the accuracy of different algorithms.
Maybe to piggyback off of that, when we're right now talking about a lot about programming languages and doing stuff ourselves and talking about it, I'd maybe take a bit of a curve. I also argue that language and stuff like that is important, but not necessarily programming language, but rather having the vocabulary to properly talk about the concepts. I mean, at least in my statistics education I had so far, Bayes' law was kind of mentioned once, and this basic thinking that I personally think is quite inherent in medicine, where I take a look at a patient and he has some principal symptoms, and I think about what tests do I want to run, what is the specificity, the sensitivity of the test. Not each and every test is good to run. For example, D-dimers, I mean, they are quite good for some things, but they're not quite good for other things. And basically, this conceptual vocabulary, I think, is quite often quite lacking. And when you have this conceptual vocabulary, I think a lot of other things come with it and come a lot easier, because when you're talking about the same concepts, the basically what words exactly you're using, what programming language you're using, or whether you're talking with a computer scientist or a clinician, I don't think that that's that relevant. I had a seminar in philosophy of science and machine learning, which was quite eye-opening because it was something that I had nothing to do with. And at the very end, the lecturer talked a bit about, at the very last session, about his philosophical research, which was in the very end about philosophical justifications for randomizations in clinical trials. But at some point, this is what I'm mentioning it, at some point he talked about clinical trials and the exploration trade-off, where we want to give patients the best possible treatment that we can give them, but at the same time, in, for example, oncological studies, we kind of need to research new things to kind of maybe provide even better in the future. And just using these words kind of circles back to the reinforcement learning problem of like multi-embedded problems, where you do the exploration-exploitation trade-off. But mentioning this concept kind of allowed me in that very moment to kind of close some very large gaps. So I think this conceptual vocabulary is missing a lot of the time. And talking about whether or not you should build your own AI tools or validate them yourselves, I think is maybe too small and too nitty-gritty, and not really looking at the bigger picture that I think we're sometimes lacking, because not everybody needs to do a master's in machine learning like I'm doing, and I'm privileged to do so. But at some point in the future, the physicians need to talk to the computer scientists about how they can help them with their research, how the algorithm maybe works. And I think the conceptual vocabulary there is maybe more important, and something also in the regards to education that we maybe need to focus on a bit more.
Yeah, I think actually we have one audience question that sort of relates to this, Finn. So thanks for asking that, which is basically a question of who could actually be the person delivering such teaching. And I would like to ask Auke van der Kuil to ask your question live, if you can. Otherwise, I will read it. Okay, I will read it out. So the question was, double degree medicine AI student in Utrecht here. What faculty do you think would be more competent and should be in the lead? here to give this education. The Faculty of Medicine or Informatics/Computer Science, in my experience, there's very little overlap. And I'll maybe pose this question to Professor Rodman first. Do you have any view on that?
Sorry, feeling on what? I was responding to David Rivkin in the chat. Very interesting conversation.
Basically, there doesn't seem to be a lot of overlap between medicine and computer science departments. And who would be the best person to deliver AI education to medical students?
What we're trying to do, and what I think the best thing to do, is have computer scientists and doctors work together. This is not something that I think anyone should own, and we should be encouraging multidisciplinary communication, meaning courses taught by both. We put our residents with MIT graduate students to have them work together. We're increasingly doing that in the Harvard curriculum, and I think that's the way. We need to talk together.
Yeah, I think that I agree with Adam. In addition, there are some small number of bilingual individuals, and those can be very good teachers too, because they understand the clinical milieu and they also understand some of the technical and can translate it into a language that can be understood by the learners. The other thing I just want to mention that we just need to mention at some point here is that these new tools can be amazing enhancements to the way we educate. So when I was a medical student, I think we had maybe one or two actors who played patients with a given disease. And we had a chance to interview that patient, right? And learn how to do a patient interview and write a note. Now you could imagine a language model could simulate patients of all stripes, different diseases, rare diseases, common diseases. You could do practice on dozens or hundreds of patients if you wanted to. So I think these new tools also offer some interesting possibilities for how we educate.
Thank you. And finally, I want to just briefly go back to, like, there's been lots of conversations in the chat as well. And they've all been really insightful, and there were a lot of comments. And just wanted to pick up one of them briefly, which is one question was, do we have sufficient data to use? That was from David Rivkin. Would you like to ask it live? Or basically comment live? Okay, otherwise I will read it.
Oh,
it was
sorry. I was trying to find where the audio button was because I'm used to Teams now. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I work for United Health Group in the responsible use of AI department. And so we are going through this process of dealing with vendors that come to us. And we've got clinicians on the other side who are using these tools. And what we're generally finding is that the developers of these tools simply don't have sufficient data to really test their products to see, are they going to work? Obviously, one of the things we'd like to see is the more openness of the data. I mean, that's something I'm still learning about because I'm coming in from sort of the more technical and computer science side of things than from the medical, because I am not a physician or anything. I'm biophysics, but not physician.
I'll comment on that quickly, and then I have to drop off because it's the top of the hour. But I mean, we've done a lot to share data, and we've done a lot of work looking at why institutions don't share data. There are many privacy concerns, people perceived legal risks, which I don't think are real. So we've shared now over 20 public data sets, including 200,000 plus chest x-rays and reports that people can use for their own research. But I think we need much, much more of that. Something that I think is really intriguing is allowing patients to opt in to share their data, make it easy for them to share their data for research. And I think patients in surveys show that they are interested and willing to do that once they understand how the data will be used to create tools that make a better life for them and other future patients. It's been a pleasure being with you. I do need to leave.
If you allow me to complement the answer of Kurt, I think that AI can also, David, do a lot on helping with data. First, technologies like the ones that we invented ourselves. We invented many years back this idea of using synthetic data to be able to not only share data with differential privacy and other types of privacy consideration. And actually, I'm happy to say that just today, the Nature Bioengineering Reviews has featuring a paper on his cover from our lab highlighting the potential of these synthetic data technologies. And they are not only for sharing, David, of data sets with privacy consideration, but also for augmentation. So increasingly, we can take data from one domain and augment data in another. We can take the power of Gen AI with data and augment small sample data sets for let's say, rare diseases. So I think synthetic data technologies are very powerful. AI technology that can complement the data agenda. Another one is really harmonization of data sets. So again, the whole field of data-centric AI, which is now very, very important. We often think about AI only as a tool set for providing models, whether it's causality, whether it's risk prediction, with forecasting. We also should think about AI maybe even more or equally on improving the quality of data, enriching data, harmonizing data sets, transferring know-how among data sets. So I think that that's a very exciting area of AI as well, which can complement what we are discussing here. But I do realize we have passed the hour, so I apologize for this comment.
Yeah, okay. And in the interest of time, unless another panelist would really like to comment before we end up, I would like to give the panelists the opportunity to give like a few final sentence remarks that you would really want to leave with us to end this session. So I'll maybe throw to Adam and then to Finn last.
So my I guess final remark, and this is something that multiple people have said, is that I actually think that the medical field is equipped with the understanding and technology on how to do these things, on how to evaluate these technologies and evaluate how people think. But we need to come together, be bold about getting our thoughts out there, because if we don't get this out, other people are going to do it for us, and they don't share the same values and probably not the focus on our patients.
Yeah, I'm thinking of some fitting words that kind of complement what Adam so just said. But yeah, I mean, in the very end, it's us that need to think about it in conjunction interprofessionally, not just physicians, computer scientists, but with also with other health professions, to in the very end put the patient first, because that's what we are here for, and not some bottom line of some AI healthcare startup.
Okay, great. Just some final words about the papers, and then we'll wrap up. Just so you know, this is a discussion framework, so it's made to be in public and to talk about it. So feel free to comment on the paper, write a small review about it, or just propose an addendum, something you would like to add. And this will help stimulate the literature as well. Before we wrap up, I would like to invite you all to our upcoming sessions as well. If Tim, you could pull that up. So we'll have a session January the 7th, where we have a conversation between Professor van der Schaar and the Dean Minor of Stanford Medicine. And then we'll have some other sessions as well, which we will announce soon, unless, Tim, you have already some things, but I think we will announce them later.
Yeah, you can already be excited for the February session, because we will go more in depth again about climb and about building predictive models. Yeah. So there's definitely a lot to look forward to next year, and we hope that you're going to be back and join us again. And we're again going to try and do these core concept sessions, and then do that basically cover fundamentals, and then do a couple of sessions that are more specialty focused on specific tools that people can use. And as always, this session is going to be up on YouTube real soon. And please let other colleagues know about these sessions such that they can join us as well. And again, I will just share the link to our paper. We would really like you to view this as a discussion framework, and please get involved, because we think AI education for clinicians is really a pertinent topic right now that needs to be addressed by as many clinicians as possible, because otherwise, as the panel has just commented, other people will do things for us and they might not have the best interest of our patients in mind. So thank you so much for being here today, and I hope we will see you all next year again. And thank you to the panel. It was really great having you.